It's a wonderful gospel reading, but sometimes it confuses people because they think you could easily infer from this gospel that the Immaculate Conception was the conception of Jesus in Mary's womb, since that's what we just read. But that's not at all what it is. It's just that we don't have any gospel about Mary's being conceived with no sin, which is what today is. And I think one of the most important lines of this is, "For nothing shall be impossible for God." Nothing is impossible for God. And so when we think about this day, we have to realize, because sometimes it's a stumbling block for people, that how could Mary have this particular grace when Jesus didn't even exist? Well, Jesus had not yet come into history, but the Son of God was eternal. So the Trinity is eternal. Jesus came at a point in history when he received his body. He became the man Jesus. But that doesn't prevent God from moving forward or backward by his grace. So when we receive our sacraments, we believe that this grace is coming from the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. His blood flowing from his body on the cross reached forward in time to extend grace to us in our baptism, through the power of the Spirit in the Eucharist. All these flow from the cross. And we kind of accept that as, okay, we get that, that's fine. But why is it difficult for God to reach backward in time to do that? It's not. Because he sits over all of time at once. Time is not existing for God. He watches everything in one moment. He can see the beginning to the end, and so he's present to all. And so we call this grace that Mary received prevenient grace. It prevented her from being stained with sin. And from the cross, Jesus reached back in time to preserve this woman from every stain of sin, including original. And so of the four dogmas of the faith that we have on the Blessed Mother, this is one of them. The first, Mother of God, Immaculate Conception, perpetual virginity, and the Assumption into heaven. These are the four about her. So today we look at this one with particular delight, because we have to recall that when you look at the Old Testament, everything that prefigured what was to come was a lesser to what became in the New Testament. It was a work that would call for something greater that would happen in the New Testament. So we have Adam, the first man over all of humanity, you could say, and Eve, his spouse. But by their fall, they became slaves to sin and the devil, under the devil's dominion. And so when we believe Jesus comes into the world to rectify what happened through the first man, we believe Mary came into the world and has rectified what happened through Eve. And so in Eve's disobedience, Mary's perfect fiat, saying yes to God, brings forth Jesus. And so it's through her yes, her fiat, let it be done to me according to thy word, that then Jesus comes. So she is this pristine figure in the history of salvation. I mean, we can't underestimate the role she has. And she's the crown jewel of all of creation. So when we think about her, we have to look back to that first reading from Genesis. Because when Eve convinces Adam to take the forbidden fruit, and God confronts them, he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between her offspring and yours. He's speaking to Satan, the serpent. Who is the woman? It's not Eve. She just got taken out. She is worthless for salvation. Nothing she can do. He's talking about Mary. So from the very beginning, this plan contained Mary, and he mentions her. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between her offspring and yours, and she will crush your head. So that's the very first book of the Bible. And then if we go to the last book of the Bible, in Revelation, it says in 12, behold, I saw a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and 12 stars about her head. And then in the very last line of that chapter, it says, the devil was enraged at her and went off to make war against her offspring, those who followed God's commands and witnessed to Jesus Christ. So the battle began in Genesis, and it goes all the way through to Revelation. And by the way, who keeps God's commands and witnesses to Jesus Christ? That's you. That's you and I. The one command Jesus said is, do this in memory of me. It was the Mass. So the real battle that is being engaged is with people who actually follow Jesus' commands. That would rule out the Protestants and the Baptists and the Methodists and the Jews and the Muslims. The devil hates everybody. But the real battle is with those who are actually following what Jesus said to do and witnessing to him to the world. So it's a small group. Let's be honest. Only 30% of Catholics go to church on a regular basis on Sunday. So it whittles down to just you people who got up on a Monday morning and for whatever particular reason, you're following the love of God to come here and worship Jesus and thank him for his mother. So you've got a bullseye on your back. Let me be the first to tell you. It's not a bad thing. You're in a small elite group, and it's a badge of honor. And we need to be able to know that because of God's great love and mercy, he chose this woman not only to be our mother, but to be the vindicator against evil in the final blow against Satan, that she would crush the serpent's head. Do you know how much this angers the devil? I mean, he understands who God is because he was there, right? The devil, the angels were created before creation. The supernatural, immaterial order was created before the material order. So he saw everything go down. He knows who God is. And to be crushed by God is one thing, but to have God then assign this small little diminutive woman of Nazareth to be the one that would crush the most prideful creature on earth, it's horribly demeaning and humiliating for him. And so we have a great power in being under her protective mantle, that we would run to her. And it's through this purity that she was made, this immaculate conception, that she remains pristine throughout all of time and now in heaven. And so it's an amazing thing that we celebrate today. And finally, one more thought about, when we look to her, because many would say, well, where is the proof of this? Let's logically look at the Old Testament, when God is giving very clear instructions and protocol on how to build the old Ark of the Covenant. The old Ark of the Covenant was the most sacred thing the Jews had. Why? Because it was this little body of work, this little collective cabinet with gold-plated out exterior and angels on top. Not that God would be in that ark. In the ark were three created things, the staff, the tablets, and the manna. So those, they're not, the manna you could argue is supernatural, but the other two things were relatively, they're material. God hovered above the ark in his spirit, and he said, this ark will be the most perfect thing that you have in your Jewish society. The ark would be the center of the temple. It would only be one day a year. The high priest would go in to minister in the ark and apply the prayers for God's people to God the Father who hovered above the ark in the Spirit. And even on that day, when the high priest went in to do the ministering prayers on behalf of the Jewish people to ask for atonement, he had to be so ritually pure. There were so many things he had to bathe and put on, and the linen and all the little ephods and all the things he would prepare himself to enter this holy place, that if he did not do it properly, he was struck dead on the spot. So what did the Jews do? Imagine if the high priest goes in and never comes out. And people would be like, well, it looks like he didn't do something right, and he's not coming back. So who wants to go in and drag him out? Nobody. They weren't going in there because they weren't even the high priest. So before he'd go in, they'd tie a red cord to his ankle. And he'd go in there and leave the cord all the way out to the outside. And if he didn't come out, they would know he's gone. They would pull him out by the cord because no one was going in there. It was too sacred, too holy for mere average guys to walk into, okay? When they would transport the ark, no one was allowed to touch that ark unless they were a priest. And there's a story in the scriptures where this poor guy, Uzzah, sees the ark that looks like it's starting to tip, so he goes to steady the ark, not a bad intention. and he's struck dead because he's not one of the priests. Do not touch that ark. It's too holy for you. Okay, that's the Old Testament, where the Spirit hovered above. Imagine now God's going to bring his literal Son into the world. This is one of the persons of the Trinity is going to enter creation. And that new ark is going to be a woman. How much more would she have to be perfect than the old ark? Oh, far beyond. Because God's not hovering above this ark. He's going to dwell within this womb. And so she had to be made perfect. And when we think about it logically, it makes perfect sense that she would be this perfect creation. And as Father Mike Schmitz often says, if you're going to make your own mother, you're going to make her perfect, right? Yeah. So this is what we honor today, the perfection and the Blessed Virgin Mary in her creation by God as the Immaculate Conception.